Greetings and welcome to Christian News and Views, episode 92. Today we're doing a Ukraine follow up, and I just want you to see the paper here today, right here. Rift in the relationship. And it's a follow up to the explosion that took place in the office in the White House. And a lot of things have been happening. And I gave you my first take yesterday, and this is a follow up. And I want to take a look at this. Is trying to be as pragmatic as possible here. Uh, I don't want you to think at any point here that I am turning against Trump. Sorry that I elected Trump. No, Trump's the man. And I trust him. I think he can be led wrong. He's a human being, just like you and me. And I think he can get the wrong advice. And I don't know what the source of that advice is. What I'm trying to do is look at what from the bigger picture here and see what's best for the United States and what's best for the Ukraine. It's one thought that I might touch on here. Just a little question is, should Ukraine depend on the United States going forward? And so we're going to look at that a little bit. So while the Republicans have been supporting President Trump, and it's been wide scale, there's been some Republicans who have supported Zelensky. Most of them have been ones who are to the left a little bit. Not what I would call people that I would necessarily be considered their opinions very seriously, but they have supported President Zelensky, and I think that's simply politics there. But while the Republicans have been supporting President Trump, President Zelensky hasn't done too bad either. He triumphed in Europe. The Republicans called for Zelensky to resign while they focused on the disrespect of President Trump. But at the same time, Zelensky was being lauded over in Europe, and they're stepping up to the plate to take care of things. And I think I addressed that a little bit yesterday, in that I think that's a good thing. There are things in which the Trump administration are looking at, and we're going to get to that in a minute when I get to my actual opinion. But so far what we've seen is that there's a rift, and we're seeing the Republicans on one side, and I guess there's some Democrats who support the president also, President Trump, and then you have the Ukrainians on the other side, and it's a rift between the two countries. And how deep, how long, and how deep that goes, I don't know. I think the Ukrainians will continue to look to the United States for help whenever they can get it. But I don't think that's something that they're going to do going forward in a very big way, simply because, as the news is reporting, there's a rift, and that rift is bringing it to a halt. I haven't seen any breakdown as far as any stoppage or anything like that, but that's very possible that support will come to a screeching halt. So that is something that the newspapers are actually indicating, if not going into it in depth. On top of all that, Trump and Vance both, and also other political leaders, have complained that Zelensky didn't show any gratitude to the United States for the support that it has given. So that brings us to my opinion, and that's where I'm going to start. Gratitude. Yes, the United States provided a great deal of military equipment to Ukraine, which I might add had to be fixed, altered, or repurposed to for the Ukrainian landscape. Uh, that happens in a lot of countries. It's not something contrary. I'm not even going to put down the Biden administration for it. That's just the way things are. You have equipment, and when it goes to a place where there's a war breaking out, uh, you have to adapt the equipment to the terrain. And the Ukrainians have, seem to be pretty imaginative in how they do things, and they have been able to adapt not only the United States, but there's been British, German, French uh, military equipment as well that they've had to adapt to their own landscape, to their own situation. That's that's one of the things they've had to do. But I still believe that the Biden administration slow walked the equipment to them. I seem to be the only one who talks about this, but when you looked at it, when the finally got their approval through Congress, especially back when the Democrats controlled the Congress, um, the time from that to actual delivery of the equipment to the Ukraine seemed awful long. It wasn't days or weeks, it was months. And not only 1, 2, 3 months, it was longer than that. And many times, the Ukrainians were being attacked by the Russians who had upgraded their military, and the Russians would make advances. Finally, the equipment would get there. They would make the adaptations that had to be made, and they'd get them to the front line as quickly as they could, and then they would stop the Russians. And then they would start to push them back. It's been that way throughout this war. And so, should they be some gratitude? I don't. Well, let me hold off on that for a second. Let me continue my thought here. So, why would they slow walk it? And that's a question you might ask. Well, here's my take. Because the Biden administration never looked for victory. But they were actually looking, in my opinion, they were actually looking to get a stalemate. Now, that's not original with me. I've read that elsewhere. Some people who have been analyzing the war think that at that point in time that the United States wanted a stalemate because a stalemate would make it sort of like a buffer zone, and it would also keep them they could have that go on as a war and keep it. They wanted to keep it suppressed. They didn't want to have a nuclear war or anything like that. So they'd keep it suppressed, and then that way the Russians would be stopped. But their focus would be there that they could not go to elsewhere. And the elsewhere that they couldn't go to is a place called China and North Korea. We'll get to that in a minute. So Ukraine was supposed to be thankful for that. And that was not the Trump administration. Trump administration wants to close the war, end the war. Biden administration wasn't really interested in that. So that's what they're asking for the thanks for, is for what Biden did. Not for Trump, because Trump hasn't had time to do anything yet. So Ukraine was supposed to be thankful for the support that often arrived late and cost lives. Lives they really, well, you could always argue just one life anywhere is one life too many to lose. But in a war like that, losing lives for Ukraine, and they don't have the population that Russia has. And so they have to watch over their lives a little bit closer. You don't want to lose too many. There's going to be some lost. That's the nature of war. But when you start losing a lot of people, you can just lose the whole war simply by attrition. So I won't deny that we provided substantial help. But while providing a fire truck rather than just a hose is great if you're fighting a fire. But having that truck arrive late makes the job of putting out the fire much harder to put out. And so we got a new fireman, if you want to take that analogy a little bit further, we got a new fireman on the job, and that would be President Trump. And he's trying to bring an end to the war. And that's one of the things we got to keep in mind. He's not anti-Ukraine, at least I don't read it that way. I think what he wants to do is get this war settled. And he's getting political advice, and I don't know how accurate or how reliable that political advice is he's getting. But that can make a very big difference. Some of that political advice that he's getting is probably what is going out now when we've seen it in the press, and that is where the politicians are suggesting that not Putin, but President Zelensky should resign. Now, it's funny, and also they've used the word dictator in relationship, and even President Trump has used it in relationship to Zelensky. The Ukrainian people don't agree with that at all. The Ukrainian people were divided on Zelensky with an election coming up. This was last year. An election was coming up, and the decision to postpone the election was welcomed by the Ukrainian people. And you might say, well, why would they do that? Well, because if you go to an election, you're going to have people not in agreement on things. They're going to be fighting a political battle over here, while at the same time in a war, and the two don't mesh. It would have caused all sorts of problems. It would have divided the country politically. It would have caused upheavals. It would have probably undermined the military effort to defend the nation. And so the Ukrainian people have united now behind Zelensky. They may not agree with all his policies, but now they're supporting him. And the idea of him being a dictator, they refuse that. And now the suggestion that he resign, they're against that. And so the Ukrainian people are coming together underneath Zelensky. How long that will last, no one knows on that. But Trump has succeeded in uniting the Ukrainians under their president. And my own personal view is that this would be a wrong time to have a change in the presidency. So I think that Zelensky should consider that American support, at least for the short term, cannot be counted on. Going to Europe and getting their full support, I think, was a brilliant move. And it's a move that was necessary, was already scheduled. That was the next step scheduled for him. And I think that the European countries, seeing what the United States is doing, are stepping up. And again, I mentioned this might be part of Trump's plan, because that's why it's working out. The European countries, who have the most to lose, other than Ukraine, as opposed to the United States, they're now stepping up big time. And they're making new promises, and they do have it. And even if there's your excuse for Biden was the length, the space between our country and Ukraine, well, okay, I'll let you have that for a moment. But the space between Germany, France, and England to Ukraine, the geographical space, much shorter. And they can get their equipment much sooner and have a greater impact than the American equipment. So that's a big move, a big support, and we'll just have to see how that goes. But it's been going good, and they've been contributing a great deal to the success, because the Biden equipment got there late. Often Germany and France and I think Britain also would contribute in weapons and in the training to get in there early on while they were waiting for the American equipment. So it's been very instructive to watch this whole thing play out. So those countries that are most close to action see the danger, but they're not concerned about getting gratitude or a thank you. The most important thing to them is to achieve victory, not a negotiated loss, which so far seems to be what's playing out. I use the word so far because I still think that Trump has his plan. We're just going to have to wait and see how that plan works out. It appears that many political leaders here in America believe that the Ukraine is losing the war. Yet when you look over the war, the Russian gains at the beginning were, for the most part, recaptured by the Ukrainians. I say for the most part, Russia still has some of it. Less than a third, I believe. But not only that, but the Ukrainians are knocking on the door of Crimea, which Russia had annexed. I think it was 2014 when they annexed it, which actually belonged to Ukraine originally. And prior to that, yeah, I mean, you can go way back in history. There, at one time, the Crimea may have been. At one time, Russia had dominated it. Another time, I think they've been dominated by different countries. But Crimea, most of the troops have left Crimea, and Ukrainians are poised to go in. They just need to have the equipment. They need to have some things settled. And I don't know what the weather is right now over there as to whether they can do anything. And they have the larger scale up the northern part of their own country, of Ukraine. So that's something that they have to consider. Plus, they now have land in Russia they have to defend. So where they can go is sort of a deal of moving troops from here to there and back and forth so that they can plug holes and keep things going until they get the equipment that they need and the permission to use that equipment. That was also a problem. So further, the Ukrainians counter-invaded Russia and still are in Russia despite repeated attempts to expel them. So I think it's too early to talk of concessions, especially land concessions. Oh, and did you notice that the only concessions suggested for Russia so far are security guarantees? Come on, that's laughable. I don't care. President Trump can say all he wants to say about how Putin has never broken an agreement with Trump. But Trump wasn't the president of the United States. He's the president of the United States now. And what happened to him as a individual between the two is not transferable. Putin now is looking at him as the president of the United States. And so that will, he's not, and his attitude is, if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. Now, he'll sign anything. He'll make agreements. And I'm sure that they'll find a way to make agreements at the table. But I would not put any confidence in Putin. Now, I suggested yesterday that the Trump administration is shifting its priorities to the Pacific with emphasis on China. That is a wise move. While it is true we have provided much weaponry, we have not provided boots on the ground in the Ukraine. Further, Ukraine is an internationally recognized government and should be able to function as such without any interference from any country. My conclusions? I think the United States and Ukraine should cool off a bit. Let Europe lead. It is in their backyard, and they have a larger stake in how this war ends than the United States does. I believe that Ukraine can still win this war. We have seen the Russian armed forces in action, and they have been less than impressive. Putin appears to be on shaky ground. He is considered a war criminal in many countries, but in his own country, his status is also shaky. Russians seem to support the war and Putin as a whole, but they are beginning to question the information they are being fed. And as that feeds and grows, Putin's grip on him could very well, I think it's already loosened a little bit, get really loose, and he could lose his job or more, especially with Ukraine's ability to strike deep within Russia. All of that suggests to me that Russia winning the war can only be done through negotiation. As for World War III, I also believe that will be centered around Israel, not Europe. So that's it for today. If you like this uh, podcast, you like today's, and you like the Christian News and Views podcast, why not subscribe right down below here? Subscribe to it and get not only Christian News and Views, but you also get uh, becoming a published author is fun, and that's free. Just like Christian News and Views is free, that is free. The advice is free. I give advice that can be used right away. Some of it immediately, some of it maybe you have to do some other things to get to it, but it's free. Unless you have to go out and buy a tool here or a tool there, and those are usually inexpensive, the ones I talk about. So I encourage you to subscribe, and I will do all in my power to create episodes that will inform you, encourage you, and inspire you to do that as a writer, to write that great American novel, or to write a not great nonfiction, and to get published and then marketed. I give you all sorts of advice on that. But I also give you the news here from a Christian perspective, from a non-politician. You can tell that when listening to me. I'm not a politician. But I have my opinions, and I want to share them with you. And you can do that with whatever with that you want. But I appreciate your support and continued support for those of you who have already subscribed. You have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode.